here we are transiting the Agua Clara locks of the Panama Canal. This is the north side, or the Caribbean side. We entered the canal waters about an hour and a half ago, I'd say. Very efficient. I mean, it is incredible to see. Let me just curve around. Of course, these are the expanded locks here. There's the bridge and the Caribbean out in the distance there. That's actually north rather than east. So often people think of Panama as north-south, but it's really east-west. And of course, dense jungle. Do you know, we were watching as we were coming in here, we heard howler monkeys, seen every variety of birds, but just the sheer structure of it. Obviously, we're on a cruise ship here. This is the Ruby Princess. I would say very honestly, Caribbean cruising is not for me, but this is a super highlight of highlights. It is hot and tropical here. They are giving some commentary upstairs, but it's sort of echoey, so it's actually, in my opinion, more fun to be down here on the balcony. Obviously, Panama itself gets independence just after the turn of the 20th century in 1903, and this whole area is ceded to the United States for a period and then handed back eventually. But people who lived here way back then were American citizens along the canal, and they were called Zonians. But so there's the Edificio de Maquinaria, so that's machinery buildings. The canal is extremely well run. It represents, of course, the underpinning of the economy of this fairly small country, I think fewer than 4 million people, but also represents something like 5% of all trade on planet Earth. I mean, it really is incredible to think about. There's some big buzzards up there in the distance. Gorgeous, gorgeous day. And I can only spend so long standing in the direct sunlight for all the obvious reasons. Now, people have been walking across this isthmus, well, for thousands of years, but from the very early days of the conquest of the Americas and the tragedies that followed, the Spanish would unload wealth from up in the Andes, bring them around to a fort on the Pacific side, walk them over these quite low but dangerous mountains. In fact, the route where they walked across was called El Camino de Cruces, or the Walk of the Crosses, because so many people died, principally yellow fever, but also malaria. And they go down to Portobello. Now, to drive from here to Portobello is about an hour of nice driving, beautiful beaches, but that was the main port where the wealth left from the Americas, sailed up in the big Spanish galleons to Havana, Cuba, and then across to Spain. And that is why first the French and then the English legalized the buccaneers, the privateers, the early pirates, to go and try and steal that wealth. The other great port, of course, was Cartagena, and we were just there yesterday. That's now Colombia. This was at the point of independence, part of Grand Colombia. But in the 1860s, the French, under the leadership of Lesseps, who had engineered and built the Suez Canal, came here. There's some of the workers down below. Excellent, well-paid jobs from all accounts. But the French set about building this canal, and they tried to just blast their way between the two oceans. That proved totally untenable, and it did so because, of course, this is hard volcanic rock, very stable now, but hard rock. And that attempt to build the canal cost somewhere around 22,000 lives. That was a huge wasp I was just watching. I mean, just a tragedy. And they thought that they were dying from ant bites, and so they would put water around their encampments. Well, it turned out, of course, it was mosquitoes, and they just created this breeding ground for mosquitoes. And so then, of course, after the Americans encouraged Panama to become independent, then they built the canal, and it still cost thousands of lives, but they blasted through and opened it in 1914, which of course coincided with the start of World War I. It also led to the economic severe downturn of cities like Valparaiso and Punta Arenas down in Chile, because the boats didn't have to go around the bottom of South America anymore, and also Winnipeg, Manitoba, where they used to come into the ports and take the trains across the country. Of course, the trains up there in Canada and in the States to some extent are competing with this canal by transiting across North America, but the immense amount of trade that goes around the world. And of course, during the pandemic, the canal did stay open, but we did feel what it was like to cut into these supply chains and that massive effect on the global economy. So you'll notice it is sparkling clean. The canal itself, I just saw a pilot ship go by. The canal itself works on sort of natural hydraulics. Now, that is contingent upon this being tropical rainforest, and there's not enough rain this year, an El Nino year, and so a lot of ships are being forced to wait for more water. They fill the locks up, they raise these gigantic ships, and then the water drains back out into the jungle. Now the big lake we're heading into, Gatun, was formed by the creation of the canal itself, but if there's not enough water, then some of the biggest ships, the ones known as Panamax, they just can't come through, so it's a massive issue. You will notice as we look down on the ship here how close we are to the edge, and this is where the engineering and the piloting is just so spectacular. The Panama Canal would be the ultimate bucket list destination for anyone with an engineering background, and of course just about anywhere you go in the world, everyone knows about this canal. So we're coming out to the far end of the locks and moving into the lake. The ship will dock apparently at that point. Some people are taking tours over to the capital city. Like I say, only about an hour's drive over to Great Big Panama. It's on the Pacific side. Big, modern, shiny city. And Casco Viejo, the old part of it, is really spectacular as well. It's well maintained. Probably, arguably one of the best maintained colonial cities in this part of the world. It's often likened to what Havana should look like, Havana, Cuba these days. So here they are. I guess they're getting ready to throw out some ropes. Oh, yeah, that's right. We're pulling into this last part of the lock up here, and then they'll seal up the lock behind us, raise the water, and all of a sudden there we are up at the lake level. Now, if we were to continue right across Lake Gatun, we go through 3 locks to descend down on the Pacific side. So there's just a little interesting teaser about the Panama Canal. Please do have a look as well at the video that I did a few years ago from Portobello, the port that was used before the canal was built. You'll see other freighters way in the distance there, either heading out wherever they're off to, Europe or the east coast of the United States, or the other ones waiting to come in and have their turn. Staff up and down this tropical and really very beautiful country. So thanks for joining me here at the Panama Canal.